So from the time frame of being a child, I always asked, what is heaven like? I always wanted to know, what would heaven be like when I was a Christian? And I went about a process of asking family members, my grandmother, my mom, my aunts, uncles. I asked pastors and deacons and theologians throughout my life, what was heaven like? What was heaven like? What would we do in heaven? And I've received many, many different answers. I received answers that were based on different scriptures of the Bible. I received answers such as we will all be gathered around the throne of God, and there will be people of many languages and a number that you cannot count. And we will be around the throne of God, praising God all day. And I thought to myself, that sounds quite boring, to be around the throne of God and praising God all the time for all eternity. That is not a life that I would deem as heaven. And when I would question that, some would say that, well, you're going to have a desire to want to do that. So does that take away my free will? Maybe I don't want that desire. Maybe I don't want to sit there and praise this God all day for eternity. And since there is no night, that would mean that we are eternally praising this God, because according to other scriptures of the Bible, there would not be any need for lamps, because God will provide the light and there would be no such thing as light. And so this is for eternity, continuously praising this God while cherubims fly around his head screaming, holy, holy, holy. That was not sufficient for me. And then that would take away my free will. And why give us free will here if we're not going to have free will there? If that was the case, then would it not have been more reasonable for this God, instead of having us go through this journey, to go ahead and make beings that did not have the free will and that would sit around his throne and praising him all day, and the cherubim flying over his head? It doesn't make sense to go through all the rigmarole of creating us as individuals to see whether or not we choose, since this God is supposedly knows every decision that we're going to make. It's an impractical exercise and is a waste of time. It's not efficient. And we see that nature in itself has been and is always efficient in its utilization of life. So why would this be the process? So I could not necessarily align with that. And especially since there was supposedly this war in heaven, then that would mean that there is the opportunity of free will to be able to decide whether or not you want to praise this God. But there are scriptures that says that once you enter into this new heaven, this new city of God, that evil will not be able or allowed to enter into this heaven. So if evil is not allowed, then that would negate any type of free will, because then we are all forced to just be as this God has willed us to be. Because according to the Bible, you will also receive a new body. And that new body will be different from your mortal body, and it will be a glorious body in the same way that Christ was transfigured into a glorious body according to the Bible. And if that being the case, then we are not the same as what we were here. We'll be different there, but lacking the ability of free will to choose whether or not we want to sit around a throne and praise this God all day because our names was written in this book of life. And even though some people told me that, well, you will not even have knowledge of people who are burning in hell. Now, this flies in the face of what Irenaeus wrote, in that he said that one of the greatest joys of heaven is to look over the edge of heaven and see those who are burning in hell. That seems pretty sadistic to find joy in that. But this is relatable to many different scriptures that say that when you're in heaven, all you will have is joy and joy and joy and joy. There will be no sicknesses. There will be no diseases. There will be no curses. That everything would just be joy, joy, joy. But I cannot understand nor see how anyone can have joy while watching others burn in hell, unless they lack the free will to be able to determine whether or not someone's in eternal suffering, that they do not look and have pity upon them and have some type of sorrow within them, which would negate some of that joy, joy, joy that you are supposed to have when you are in this heavenly realm. But then one of the things that stuck out to me very prominently was this. In Revelations, it says that there will be a river that flows from the throne of God. And this will be the clearest, beautiful river. Sound like Trump a little bit. It's going to be the best river ever. The clearest river you've ever seen. I can't do Trump, but I can't imitate him. But it'll be this very clear, beautiful river. But on the sides of this river, on both sides, there will be the tree of life. And the tree of life will produce its fruit 12 times a year, 12 through the 12 months of the year. And it actually denotes months. If there is no darkness, if there is no cycle of the sun and the moon, if there are no seasons, how will we know what months are? How can months be something that exists? How can time actually exist in this realm where we can identify months? And these trees then produce its fruit during these months. And this is supposed to be the tree of life. Now, if we look at it from the history of the idea of the tree of life, the first time the tree of life is mentioned is when we're talking about the Garden of Eden. And in the Garden of Eden, the tree of life represents a consumable plant life, or a technology, if we look at it from the Anunnaki story, that allows for the human body to be able to regenerate itself, for the body to be able to maintain its pseudo immortality, because immortality is not real unless you are consuming this tree of life that reinvigorates your body so that it can continue to exist on a semi-permanent basis. So I questioned and wondered, if we have this new glorious body that is supposed to be like Jesus, then why do we need to consume this fruit from the tree of life in order to sustain ourselves in this heavenly realm? And there are scriptures that would indicate that in heaven, you're going to be living in some type of garden, that heaven will have this garden, this foliage, and from the tree of life, the petals, the leaves of the tree of life will heal all the nations. Why is there a need for healing if these bodies have been made glorious? And why are we still separated in nations if we have moved into this heavenly realm where everybody supposedly are the ones who believe in this Jesus and have become one nation? So therefore, I looked at this and said that this is basically them pulling off of the idea of Eden, that man will simply be walking around Eden, being able to eat from every tree, which is why the Bible also says that there will be no labor in heaven. There's no work for you to do. You would just be there, walking around, praising this God constantly, taking a lunch break once a month to be able to go and eat from these 12 trees of life every month, so that you can still sustain your body, this new glorious body that you're living in heaven, so you can go right back to praising this God. It seems it's not something that these people are seeing. It's something that they are, in whatever delusional state that they find themselves in, whether they're on some type of magic mushrooms or cannabis or something like that, and their mind already knows of this story of Eden, and so they're forcing this story of Eden to fit what they deem heaven is going to be. And by the way, it's Philippians 3 is one of those verses that talks about how you're going to have this new body that you will then wake up in your glory when all things have been said and done, just for reference. But the fact still remains that if heaven is supposed to be this eternal place of happiness and joy, but we do not have free will, we are now become automatons to just worship this God, which this God could have just done that in the first place and saved us from all this life that we have now been living in. And this God could have just made it so in the very beginning, seeing as how he messed up with his first angelic beings, and they had the free will to be able to revolt against this God. And then people are pulling from this Anunnaki story of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge in order for them to facilitate their heaven story. These are just stories. These are just allegories. These are just thought processes that people had who were in a situation where they thought that their lives was so wrecked that they needed some type of escape, some type of blessing that they would receive for all the suffering to which they were going through, instead of looking at life as it was at their time frame and figuring out how to alleviate the suffering to which they were living in. It is nothing more than that. There is no Christian version of heaven that actually would fit the type of immortality that people are seeking and the type of glory that people are seeking. It is only when you find it within your own mind and peace and not living with fear and anxiety that you can find this heaven and train your mind to be able to elevate to that once you leave this poverty of the flesh. So always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable.